seen the faces of his parents. That was not an unusual occurrence in the kingdom. Orphans dying in the mud was hardly big news. Climb had originally been fated to die in such a way on that rainy day. And then, on that day, Climb had seen the sun. He, a being who could only crawl amidst the muck and filth, had been deeply entranced by that gross incandescence. As a child, he had only felt admiration. But as he grew older, that feeling inside him grew ever more unshakable. It was love. He had to quash that emotion. It was a miracle, of the kinds which the bards sang in the heroic sagas. It could not possibly take place in real life. Just as no man could touch the sun, Climb's feeling would not be able to reach her. No, he could not do so. The woman whom Climb loved so deeply was destined to be someone else's bride. As a princess, she could not belong to someone like Climb, whose origins were unclear, and who was even lower than a commoner. If the king passed away, the first prince would inherit the throne, and Renner would be married off to one of the great nobles. In all likelihood, the prince had already arranged something like this with one of them. She might even be sent to another country, as part of a political marriage. The fact that Renner, who was of marriageable age, was still single, and had no fiancé was quite surprising. Their time together was so precious that he would pay any price to halt the march of the clock's hands, just so he could preserve these golden moments forever. If he did not spend his time on training, he could enjoy more of these moments. Climb had no talent. He was a mere man. Through repeated practice, he had become quite strong for a mere soldier. Then, should he not be content with that? Should he not stop training, stay by Renner's side, and not waste their brief time together? But, would that really be a good thing? Climb admired that sun-like brilliance. It was not a lie, and neither was he mistaken. It was Climb's sincere wish. However, it's because I'm a man. Climb smiled. Indeed. Climb wanted to stand by Renner's side. The sun shone brilliantly in the sky, and a mere man could not hope to reach it. Even so, Climb wanted to climb the highest peaks in order to get as close to it as he could. He did not want to merely admire and praise the sun from afar. This was a young man's feeble wish, but at the same time it was a wish that perfectly fitted a young man. He wanted to become a man worthy of being joined to the woman he admired, even if their union could never be. He could endure his friendless life, his harsh training, and his labors which took away from his sleep because of his wish. Let others laugh at him for his foolishness. After all, they could not understand how he felt unless they truly loved someone. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. Sabas narrowed his eyes as he studied Climb. There was a stern look on his face, as though he were trying to decipher the compressed subtleties of Climb's simple reply. Then, he nodded. After hearing your answer, I have decided how to train you. Just as Climb was about to offer his thanks, Sabas' outstretched hand stopped him. However, and I pray you will forgive my bluntness, you have no talent. Proper training will take a very long time. However, I do not have that time. I wish to train you in a way that will show results quickly, but it will be an arduous process. Climb gulped again. The look in Sabas' eyes sent a chill down Climb's spine. Those eyes were filled with unbelievable power, exceeding the spiritual pressure which Gazef exerted when serious. Thus, he could not respond right away. Frankly speaking, you might die. He was not joking. Climb's instincts told him that much. Climb did not fear death, but he wanted to die for Renner. He did not want to throw his life away for a selfish reason. He was not a coward, no, perhaps he might be very craven. Climb gulped once more and froze. Silence filled the surroundings for a while, and he could even hear the clamor from the distance. Whether or not you die depends on your attitude. If there is something important to you, something which makes you want to live, even if it is only to scrabble along the ground, then it ought to be fine. Was he not going to teach him martial arts? That question surfaced in Climb's mind, but that was not the question now. He pondered the meaning of Sabas' words, made sure he understood it, and then gave his response. I am prepared for it. I leave the rest to you. Do you believe you will die? Climb shook his head. He did not. That was because Climb would forever have his reason, one which would keep him clinging to life even if he had to do so by crawling like a worm. Sabas looked into Climb's eyes, as though divining his intentions through them. Then he nodded heavily. I understand. Then, we shall begin here. Right here? Yes. It will be quick. A few minutes will do. Please draw your sword. What's he going to do? Climb drew his sword as asked. His heart was a blend of uneasiness and confusion about the unknown, with faint underpinnings of curiosity and expectation. The sound of the sword leaving its sheath echoed through the cramped alley. Climb braced his weapon in a middle stance, and Saba's eyes were fixed on him. Here I come. Please try and remain conscious. And in the next moment, it felt as though icy razors had exploded forth in all directions from Sabas. Climb could no longer speak. Sabas now stood at the heart of a vortex of murderous intent. This bloodlust felt like it could crush Climb's heart in an instant, and it seemed almost visible as it washed over him like a tsunami. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the scream of a soul being pulverized. It felt close to his side, yet far away, and perhaps the voice might even have been his own. As the obsidian flow of killing intent swept him away, Climb felt his consciousness slowly bleaching away into whiteness. This overwhelming terror made his body want to abandon his mind, which was carried away by the wave that swamped him. Is that all a man is? That was only a warm-up. Saba's disappointed voice seemed abnormally loud through the depths of Climb's fading consciousness. The meaning of those words pierced Climb deeper than any blade. It even made him forget the fear before him for a moment. His heart pounded heavily in his chest. Ooh! Climb gasped. He was terrified. He wanted to run. But he fought the urge to do so, even as the tears streamed down his cheeks. His hands trembled as they gripped his sword, and the point of his sword danced around like a demented bumblebee. His chain shirt made rustling noises from his full-body tremors. Even so, Climb clenched his chattering teeth, and tried to bear up against the mortal terror which came from Sabas. Sabas laughed at the pathetic sight before him. Then he brought his right hand before his eyes and slowly clenched it into a fist. In the blink of an eye, the fist in front of him was as round as a ball. He then pulled that fist back, like he was drawing a bow. Climb understood what was going to happen, and shook his head. Of course, Sabas paid his response no heed. Now then, prepare to die. Sabas' fist ripped through the air with a whoosh, like a fully drawn arrow being loosed. It was instant death. As time seemed to slow to a crawl, Climb's instincts spoke to him. The image of his certain death dominated his mind, like a massive wrecking ball that was far larger than himself, approaching at incredible speeds. Even if he raised his sword to block, that fist would surely smash it easily. His body was frozen. It had gone stiff from tension. He could not escape the death. Before him Climb's resignation to his fate filled him with anger. If he could not die for Renner, then why had he not died back then? He should have frozen to death in the rain and shuffled off the mortal coil by himself. Renner's beautiful smile appeared before him. It was said that on the brink of death, people would see their lives flash before their eyes like a zoetrope. The common opinion the brain was desperately searching through its past records for a way to escape its current predicament. However, it was somewhat laughable that the last thing Climb would see was the smile of his beloved princess. Indeed, Climb saw Renner as she smiled. When she had saved him, the young Renner had not smiled. When had she started smiling upon him? He could not remember. However, he vividly remembered Renner's timid smile from back then. How would she react if she learned that Climb had died? Would that smile darken, like the clouds obscuring the sun? Are you kidding me? A blaze of anger roared up within Climb's heart. She had picked up the life of his that had been thrown away along the roadside. That would mean his life was no longer his own. He lived for Renner, to grant her joy however minuscule it might be. Isn't there any way I can get out of this? The exploding passion within him burst the chains of fear that held him prisoner. His hands could move. His legs could move. The eyes that sought only to be closed slowly opened, desperately seeking the image of the fist which was streaking in at him. His senses were pushed to their very limit, to the point where he could even sense the faint movements of particles in the air. There was a phenomenon called an adrenaline rush, where the brains of people in extreme duress would release the limits on their physical bodies, allowing for a burst of incredible power. At the same time, the brain would secrete vast quantities of hormones, and the mind's full capacity would be focused on survival. The brain would compute vast quantities of information, to find the best possible way to live on. In that moment, Climb had stepped into the realm of a first-rate warrior. Yet, the speed of Seba's attack was beyond even that lofty domain. Perhaps it was too late to dodge Seba's fist. Perhaps it had always been too late. Even so, he still had to move. He could not give up here. As time slowed to a crawl, Climb saw that his own movements were as slow as molasses. But still, he turned himself, trying to move. And then, Seba's fist roared past Climb's face, with the sound of thunder. The gale which followed clipped off several strands of Climb's hair. A calm voice filtered into his ears. "Congratulations. How does it feel to conquer the fear of death?" Climb stood there dumbly, unable to understand his meaning. How was it like to face death? How was it like to surpass it? Climb breathed heavily, looking at Seba's like his soul had been stolen away. There was no hostility around Seba's, as though it had been nothing more than a lie. He relaxed as he began to realize Seba's intent. Climb collapsed like a puppet whose strings had been cut, as though he had been supported by the murderous intent from just now. He fell on all fours in the alley, hungrily gasping fresh air into his lungs. Fortunately, you did not die from shock. These things happen when one is so certain of one's death that one gives up the will to live. There was a bitter taste in the depths of Climb's throat. He was certain that it was the taste of death. If you repeat this a few more times, I am sure you will be able to overcome ordinary fear. However, one thing you must know is that fear triggers the survival instinct. If you are numb to that sense, then you will be unable to feel even clear and present danger. You must be able to clearly tell when a true threat approaches. Forgive me for prying, but what kind of man are you? Climb groaned from his place on the ground. What do you mean? That killing intent was not normal. What exactly? I am simply an old man who has some confidence in his skills. For now. Climb could not tear his eyes away from Seba's face. What seemed to be a congenial smile also looked like a savage grin from one of absolute power, one who far surpassed Gazef. He was probably a being who was greater than Gazef, himself the mightiest warrior of the surrounding nations. Climb willed his curiosity to be satisfied. He felt it would be best not to continue prying into that mystery. Even so, where had the old gentleman Sebas come from? That was the sole question that burned within his heart. He even wondered, could he be one of the 13 heroes? Then, let us try again. Wait. Please wait. I have something to ask you too. The voice of a frightened man interrupted Sebas from behind. Part 4 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day 10/27 Brain left Gazef's home. He looked back and thought about how he would get back, and then he committed the house's exterior appearance to memory. His mind had been blurred from hypothermia when Gazef brought him here, so his memories from back then were hazy. He knew Gazef's address because he had been planning to challenge the man to a duel someday. However, that information had been gathered by word of mouth, and it was somewhat inaccurate. There's no sword stuck in the roof. He cursed the information broker who had told him that, and carefully inspected the house. It was much smaller than the noble residences, and it looked more like a commoner's dwelling. However, it was more than enough for Gazef and the husband and wife who lived there with him. After memorizing the house's exterior, Brain set forth. He did not have any particular destination in mind. He did not want to buy weapons, armor or magic items. What should I do from now on? His mumbled voice faded into the air. He was not particularly opposed to just vanishing somewhere. In fact, the notion was still quite attractive to him. He searched within himself for what he should do next, but he found only a yawning void within his heart. His goal had been destroyed, utterly annihilated without leaving a trace behind. That being the case, why, he looked down to his right hand, which still held his katana. He still had his chain shirt on under his clothes. It was fear that had kept his sword in hand during his journey to the royal capital. He knew that his blade was useless against that monster, who could deflect his best attacks with her pinky fingernail, but going unarmed still frightened him. That being the case, why was he still holding his blade? He could have left it in Gazef's home. Was it because he was still afraid? Brain thought about it, and then shook his head. That was not it. In that case, why was he holding his katana? In the end, the answer still eluded him. Brain recalled the first time he had come to the royal capital as he walked. Some buildings had remained the same, like the Magician's Guild or the royal palace, but there were many new buildings which were absent from his memories. Just as Brain was savoring the difference between his memories and reality, he noticed a commotion ahead of him. The noise made him furrow his brows. He sensed violence coming from the crowd ahead. Brain was about to turn and head elsewhere when an old man caught his eyes. The old man wormed into the crowd, like he was sliding his way in. What's that? What's with the way he's moving? He blinked several times, unconsciously gasping in awe. The old man's movements beggared belief. Brain wondered if he was dreaming, or if he had been affected by some kind of magic. Perhaps even Brain might not be able to move as the old man had. It was a godly technique that required one to keenly grasp the will of one's counterpart, or in this case, the flows of strength and motion within the entire crowd. In other words, those movements were at a sort of a pinnacle. His feet carried him toward the crowd without hesitation. Brain shoved others out of the way, and when he reached the center, he saw the instant when the old man struck the younger man's chin. What? Could I have blocked that blow just now? It'd be hard, right? Did he draw away the other man's vision and attention? Am I overthinking this? Still, that was a magnificent strike. You could teach it in a textbook, he grunted to himself as he replayed the punch he had just seen in his mind. Granted, he had not gotten a good look at it, and it was very difficult to measure swordsmen and pugilists on the same scale. Even so, that brief glimpse had made Brain realize that the old man before him was incredibly skilled. For all he knew, that old man might even be stronger than himself. Brain bit his lower lip as he compared the profile of the old man's face to the list of martial exponents in his memory. However, he did not find a match. Who on earth is he? The old man left the crowd in an instant. A teenaged boy trailed behind him. On a whim, Brain followed the boy, as though he had been hooked by some bait. His instincts told him that the man had eyes in the back of his head, so did not dare tail him directly. However, if he followed the youth, he would not have to worry about being spotted. From a more cunning point of view, he would still be safe even if the boy was discovered. While following them, Brain sensed several other presences. However, Brain did not care about them. Before long, the two of them turned a corner and entered a darkened area. Brain felt uneasy, because that move seemed like it was calculated to lure him into a trap. Doesn't that kid find it strange? Just as he began to feel surprised, the boy spoke to the old man. The two of them spoke near the turning point of an alley. Thus, Brain took cover around the bend and eavesdropped on them. In summary, the boy was asking the old man to train him. As if an old man like that would never accept a punk like that as a disciple. If one were to compare the two of them, the boy would be a pebble, while the old man was a gigantic gemstone. The two of them lived in completely different worlds. How sad. Not knowing how badly you're outclassed is truly sad. Give it up, kid. Brain did not speak those words, merely mumbled them to himself. Those words were directed at the boy, and they were also a frank criticism of an utter idiot who had once thought himself invincible, namely, his past self. He continued listening in, although he had no interest in the brothel, and it would seem that the old man was willing to train the youth up. Brain had no idea what that kid had to offer that interested that amazing old man. What's this? Have I misjudged someone again? No, that can't be. That kid has little ability as a warrior. Surely he can't have any talent. How was the old man going to train him? He could only hear them from here, but he could not see what was going on. Curious, Brain concealed his presence and eased himself forward to spy on them. But before he knew it, a terrifying aura shot through him. He screamed wordlessly. His entire body froze. It felt like a massive carnivore pressing its face against his and exhaling all over him. The oncoming torrent of murderous intent actually dyed the world a different color. He could not even blink, much less move. For a moment he thought his heart had stopped beating. Brain felt that Shaltir Bloodfallen was the most powerful being in the world, but what he felt now was comparable to her. It might actually have stopped the heart of a weak-willed person. His legs trembled, and then dumped him onto his butt upon the ground. Even I've been reduced to this state. Doesn't that mean that kid's going to drop dead on the spot? If he were lucky, he might pass out first. Brain crawled along the ground, nervously stealing a glance at the two of them. What he saw shocked him to the core, to the point where he forgot his fear for a moment. The kid was still standing. His legs were trembling like Brain's had. But he was still standing. What's going on? Why is that talentless punk still on his feet? Brain could not understand why the youth could still stand while fear had reduced his legs to a puddle of quivering jelly. Did he have some sort of magic item, or martial art which resisted fear? Or did he have some special talent? Indeed, there was no way to guarantee he did not possess such an item. However, his instincts told him that none of the above applied as he looked at the kid's wavering back. The answer was hard to believe, but it was the only one possible. That kid was stronger than Brain. Impossible. It can't be. The kid looked like he had been training himself, but he did not have enough muscle on him. After observing the way that the kid moved while trailing him, Brain had concluded that the kid was hardly talented. And yet, this average kid was standing where he had fallen. What's going on? Am I really that weak? His vision blurred. Brain knew he was crying, but he could not bring himself to wipe his tears. He tried to swallow his moaning, but the tears continued flowing regardless. Why? Brain clutched at the dirt and tried to force himself back to his feet. However, the tsunami of killing will rendered him immobile. His legs refused to move, as though under someone else's control. All he could do was lift his head and watch the two of them. He saw a back. The boy was still standing, even now. The boy could still stand against that old man and his wave of murderous intent. That feeble back now seemed so far out of his reach. Was he really that weak? By the time the surge of bloodlust had dispersed like mist, he had only managed to get back onto his feet. That fact frustrated Brain. The old man and the boy looked like they were going to train further, but Brain could no longer contain himself. Gathering up his courage, he rushed out from around the corner and shouted, "Wait! Please wait!" Brain no longer thought about not interrupting their training session, or even picking a good time to make his appearance. The youth turned around as he heard that desperate cry. His shoulders shuddered and there was a look of shock on his face. In his position, Brain would probably have done the same. "First, please let me apologize to the two of you. I simply could not wait any longer." "Do you know him, Sabis-sama?" "No, I do not." "I see, so he was not a friend of yours either." The two of them turned suspicious looks on him, but Brain had already expected as much. "Please allow this one to state his name." "This one's name is Brain Unglaus." "Please permit this one to apologize once more to the two of you. I really am very sorry for this." He bowed lower than he had before, and he could sense a slight movement from both of them. After waiting for a sufficiently long time to convey his sincerity, Brain raised his head, and he sensed that their caution towards him had dulled somewhat. "Then, what brings you here?" In response to the old man's question, Brain glanced at the youth. How did you do it? As he saw the clueless look on the kid's face, Brain asked once more, like he was coughing up blood. How could you remain standing before that murderous intent? The boy's eyes went wide. Since he typically feigned a blank look on his face, even this small change signaled a huge emotional upheaval inside him. I just wanted to know. That surge of bloodlust was more than most people could bear. Even even this one could not endure it. Yet you were different. You endured it. You stood against it. How did you do it? How did you accomplish such a feat? His excitement was making him repeat himself, but he could not tamp it down. When faced with the overwhelming power of Shaltir Bloodfallen, he had been so afraid that he had fled. Yet, this boy had faced the same degree of killing will and held his ground. He wanted to know what was the difference between them. He had to find out, no matter the cost. Brain seemed to have conveyed his earnest passion to the kid. He was confused, but he carefully considered the matter before answering, I don't know. I don't understand it myself. I have no idea how I could take that storm of bloodlust. Still, maybe it was because I was thinking of my liege. Your liege? Yes. As long as I think of the great person whom I serve, I have the strength to carry on. How could anyone endure like that for such a reason? Brain almost shouted. But before that, the old man quietly explained his meaning. In other words, his loyalty was sufficient to overcome his fear, Unglaus-san. People can exert great strength for something they cherish. For instance, a mother can hold up a pillar in a collapsing house to save her children, or a husband could hold up his wife with one hand before she falls. I feel that is the power of mankind. In other words, this young man has tapped on that power. It is also not limited to him. As long as you have something which you will not forsake, you will certainly be able to draw on strength you could never have imagined. Brain could not believe it. His goal, the thing he would not forsake, was his thirst for strength. But that was meaningless now. That dream had been shattered with ease, and all he could do was run in fear. Brain's face turned gloomy, and he lowered his head to look at the ground. Then, the old man's next words made him jerk his head up again. Something built up by yourself is fragile. Once you fall, it is the end for you. Do not rely on yourself for everything. If you can build your confidence with someone else and give of yourself for others, then you will not fall even if you suffer a setback. Brain fell silent. Did he have something like that? He could not think of anything. That was because he had abandoned everything else save his quest for the sword. Could be that the things he had discarded in his search for strength were actually the most important things? Brain could not help but laugh. He laughed at his mistake-filled life. Neither could he help the bitter complaint that next escaped him. I abandoned it all. Is it too late for me to take them back? You'll be fine. Even someone without talent like me managed to do it. Someone like you can surely do it too, Unglaus-san. It's definitely not too late for you. There was no basis to the young man's words. Yet, strangely enough, his words warmed Brain's heart. You really are a gentle and strong person. I am truly sorry. The boy froze as Brain apologized to him out of the blue. Brain had taken such a brave lad as a punk and looked down on him. I'm a fool. I'm such a fool. Ah yes, you said you were called Brain Unglaus. Were you the same Brain Unglaus who fought Stronov-sama to a draw in the past? So you knew that too. Did you watch that fight? Ah, I didn't. I just heard someone talk about it. Stronov-sama said that you were an amazing swordsman, and that you were easily in the running for the strongest man in the kingdom. After seeing your movements and calm poise, I now realize the truth of Stronov-sama's words. Swamped by the sheer force of Climb's goodwill, Brain struggled to stammer out an answer. Thank you. I feel I've got a long way to go, but it pleases me to receive such praise from you. Unglaus-san. Sir, please call me Unglaus. There is no need for you to be so formal to a mook like myself. In that case, I am Sebastian, but I hope you will call me Sabas. Now then, Unglauskuan. Being addressed as Kuan embarrassed Brain a little, but given the difference in their ages, such a term was only fitting. Can I entrust you with training of Climecuan? I believe that will be beneficial to you as well, Unglauskuan. Ah. Forgive me. My name is Climb, Unglausama. Were you not going to be trained by him, forgive me. Was Sabas-sama not going to train you? I believe I interrupted the two of you while you were in the middle of discussing something. Indeed. That was my original intention, but it would seem we have guests. I had intended to call them over. Ah, they are here. It would seem they took a while to prepare themselves for battle. Sabas looked off to one side. Brain took a bit longer to look in the same direction. Three men slowly revealed themselves. They wore chain shirts and carried sharp daggers in hands protected by heavy leather gloves. They were not radiating hostility, but full-on murderous intent. Said intent seemed to be directed at the old man, but they did not look like the kind who would let witnesses live. Brain was visibly shocked as he saw them, and he screamed, "No way! They're still coming even after feeling that bloodlust? Just how strong are these people?" If that were the case, then each of them was probably on par with Brain. No, they would be stronger than him. Could it be that their lousy tailing skills were because they were trained warriors who were not adept at following others? And then, Sabas eased Brain's worries. I trust you're aware that I only directed my will at the two of you, right? Even Brain felt that his reply sounded very stupid. The murderous intent directed at Climecuan was to train him. In your case, it was because I did not know who you were, and wanted to draw you out. Either that, or sap your will to fight, hostility and so on. But I viewed them as enemies from the start, so I did not direct my killing intent at them. It would be bad to frighten them off. Brain was shocked beyond the capacity to even express it as he heard Sabas casually explain the startling truth. Being able to finally control killing will of that intensity was beyond what he knew to be possible. I see. Then, do you know who they are, Sabas-sama? I can guess. Still, I cannot be sure. Thus, I wish to capture one or two of them for questioning. However, Sabas dipped his head in apology. It would seem I accidentally involved the two of you in this. May I trouble the two of you to leave this place? Before that, I wish to ask you a question. Are they criminals? They feel that way to me. They're obviously the evil-doing sort. A fire blazed up in Clime's eyes as he heard Brain say that. Perhaps this might be getting in your way, but I wish to fight as well. As a man who protects the public order of the royal capital, it falls to me to defend its people as well. It's not like we're sure that Sabas is on the side of good here, Brain thought to himself as he played devil's advocate to that statement. Indeed, given his honest and straightforward attitude, Sabas certainly seemed to be in the right compared to that lot. However, they could not be sure of that. He's really green. Still, he could understand how the kid felt. Even Brain could instantly conclude who to help, between the man who had saved a kid from a bunch of drunken toughs and the other men. Personally, I don't really think you need the help, but, Sabas-sama. Please allow me, no, please allow this one to lend you a hand. Brain took his place by Clime's side. Sabas did not need their aid. Indeed, he had even said that they could leave, and he would be fine. However, he wanted to learn from Climb, who fought for others. He wanted to choose the path he would never have traveled in the past. He wanted to protect the boy with a strong heart, but whose swordplay was lacking. Brain saw the weapons they were holding and frowned. Poison, is it? Using a double-edged sword like that indicates they ought to have some experience under their belts. Are they assassins? The daggers they were using were called mailbreakers. There were reservoirs carved into the blades of their weapons, and said reservoirs reflected the oily glow of a dangerous liquid. The fact that these men seemed to prioritize agility and ease of movement, unlike professional swordsmen, was a better indication of the truth than Brain's self-directed mumblings. Climecuan, you'd best be careful. Unless you have a magic item that resists poison, don't let them nick you so much as once. Someone with Brain's level of physical prowess was pretty much immune to poison, but people like Climb might succumb to strong toxins. They've appeared in front of us, but they're not making a move yet. Are they waiting for the other two people to circle around behind us? Since this is a rare opportunity, why don't we break through them from the front? Sabas deliberately raised his voice loud enough for them to hear, and the men's movements froze. They had clearly been shaken by the exposure of their encirclement plan. That seems about right. It would be safest to crush the ones in front, and then mop up the ones behind. It would seem Brain shared Sabas' opinion. However, Sabas himself rejected Brain's words. But that would let them get away. How about this? I'll deal with the three in front, so could I leave the two circling around behind us to you? Brain nodded, and so did Climb. This was Sabas' fight, and they were the ones imposing on Sabas to let them help. They ought to listen to Sabas, so long as he had not made any fatal errors. All right, let's go. After saying that to Climb, Brain turned his back on the men. The reason why he dared show that defenseless side of himself to those men was because Sabas was around. As he left his back to Sabas, he felt as safe as though he were defended by a thick castle wall. Well then, while it is a shame, please allow me to be your opponent. Oya, please do not harbor any designs on those two, all right? Looking back, Brain saw